let's say, so how would you help people? Let's say someone listening to this right now is in a relationship that isn't great,
Mhm.
but it used to be great, or there's some sort of ambiguity that it's not cut and dry. How would you help someone? Let's say a client comes to you. How would you help someone evaluate if they need to think about leaving a relationship, or they should leave a relationship? Like, how do you table that in your mind?
Huh. Well, I wonder, I know that it sounds like you left a relationship a few years ago.
Yeah, I did.
Would you be willing to share any about that if I asked you some questions and we kind of went down
Um,
that thread? It's okay
Probably.
if you don't want to
Yeah, I
really.
think that
No,
would be
okay.
too specific.
Okay,
That's not.
sure.
That wouldn't
Yeah.
so be so much kind to the other
Of
person.
course, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, so I guess the reason that I asked that is because, again, I don't have sort of like this list of questions that I rattle through, but really,
Right.
I want to know what my client's experience is, right? So, one of the things you mentioned was, it used to be great, but it's no longer great. So, okay, that's interesting. Like, how do you make sense of that, right? Like, let's try to understand. Let's pull back the threads there and understand what's their theory around how things have changed. Is it that something within them has changed? Is it something that they believe something within their partner has changed? Have the circumstances changed in some way? Is it just that, hey, after about 2 years, I mean, we're through the honeymoon stage and all of that, like dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine and all these like yummy chemicals that are going through our body that are meant to inspire a union for evolutionary purposes, that those have kind of like we've developed a tolerance to them. And we were now
Hmm.
settled into like a more kind of comfortable phase of the relationship, which by the way, is also so necessary. Like if we were always in that like
Yeah.
really like addictive stage, like we've all been there in a relationship where in the first 6 months or year, or depending on, I mean, gosh, I'm very open about the fact that my husband and we broke up 3 times over the course of 5.5 years. And it's like it felt like a new relationship every time you got back together. So it was a little addictive, right? Like you begin that relationship again, and it's like, oh wow, like okay, like are they gonna call me back? Or are they gonna when are they gonna text? Am I gonna see them? Oh great, let me like dress up and do all the things and get the lingerie and all that stuff.
All right.
And the beginning phases of relationships are amazing and also not practical for life. Like if we were always in that addictive place, we'd never get any work done. We'd ignore the rest of our friends. Like we wouldn't take care of our health. We wouldn't get any sleep. Like, it's not realistic. So my first question would be to really understand, okay, how do you make sense of this change? Because unless that person, has really just been in complete avoidance state and never paying attention to their experience, they may have some ideas or some theories. So
Right.
kind of want to check in around that. Now, I guess if there is sort of like a stark contrast or a change, then and they may be able to explain, okay, well, now I think my partner might be depressed. He lost a job or she lost their job, or, they lost their parent, or we moved to a new place and they've been really struggling, or
Hmm.
something about themselves. Yeah, like, I've just started to feel kind of disconnected from them and I can't explain why. Now, when there's sort of a disconnection that they can't quite explain, that often will come back to trauma, to relational trauma, where we have various different attachment styles that form in childhood. And after about 18 months to a couple of years, I think that's about the time frame, our attachment system really comes online. And what that's meant to do is sort of protect ourselves from vulnerability and commitment, because we may have learned in childhood that like vulnerability and commitment are really scary and you shouldn't rely on other people. They are going to leave you or hurt you, or, it's shameful to do so. And so being vulnerable in relationship, while for some people it actually is like so yummy and helps us feel close, for others it can cause a lot of shame and anxiety. So my kind of first step is really getting a sense of like, all right, like what's happening here? Is this a case where like this is a circumstantial issue, which oftentimes can be changed?
Hmm.
This is something within, their partner, in which case, like maybe couples therapy might be the right answer, and couples therapy always can be the right answer, or a right answer to include in the mix here. But I also really want to understand, like, what is their perception? Because if perhaps, their unconscious experience is, I got to run away from here because this is scary and I'm going to commit and I'm going to either hurt them or I'm going to be hurt, or suddenly I'm going to be responsible for this person's emotions, just like I was with my enmeshed mother or whatever it is.
Right.
Um, then probably what's happening is consciously they're coming up with like some reasons that like make it justifiable that they want to leave. Well, like we don't have sex anymore, or which by the way is very much like, I don't want to minimize not having sex anymore, but usually that's a symptom versus kind of like the reason to end a relationship. Or
Right.
oh, I don't know, I've just feeling really irritated with them and I can't tell why, just everything they do pisses me off. And so if things are a little bit more kind of like ephemeral, like not quite, you can't quite nail it down, and it sort of seems like they're coming up with these like reasons that don't seem super justifiable, then it may be because there's something more unconscious happening. So I just want
Right.
to like really understand more. And my job is never to come at it like, oh, there are some relationship therapists. Again, usually they're practicing from a more religious background, but their goal is to like make the relationship work at all costs, and that's certainly not my goal. My goal is just be like, hey, let's just try to make you as awake as possible as you explore this and decide whether or not you want to leave, or whether or not leaving might help you get more information. Because the reality is like, and as I said, myself included, but a lot of people break up and get back together and sometimes need that breakup to gather information and be like, oh, interesting. I really do love and miss this person. But when I was so close to them, I felt so threatened because, again, my attachment system came online and told me that I was going to be hurt. So I had to leave. But the moment I left, I felt relief for a week. And then suddenly I realized, wow, I miss and love this person so much. So
Right.
that's just one example of what can happen, when we break up. But I guess I'll pause there because I know I've said a lot, but my first step is really just trying to understand that person's experience and just kind of like check in around certain areas where to ensure that kind of like their unconscious experience and their conscious experience are aligned, and that they're
Hmm.
just feeling as awake as possible, as I said, and to make an intentional decision moving forward.